So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Ray Gerber, who is the co-founder of the Institute for Journey Management and author of Journey to Customer Obsession, a blueprint for CX maturity and enterprise transformation. Now, there's about 3 of these things in these books in the series, and we're not going to talk about all of them because Ray's very kindly done a bit of an executive summary, which is another sort of outcrop of his work. But Ray, I know we've talked on the podcast recently with you and Mark about the Institute for Journey Management. And so welcome back. Congratulations on the books. Anything do you want to introduce yourself for people that are not familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm originally from South Africa, if you can know by the accent. And Adrian and I was just reminiscing about some safaris in Africa, which obviously is one of my favorites. If I say my happy place is halfway on the golf course and halfway on a safari. So I suppose it's not a bad happy place to be. But beside that, I've spent now 45 years in the technology industry, and the last 20 years primarily focused on transitioning from CRM into customer communications with a company called Thunderhead, and then transitioning into customer engagement on the back of my knowledge at Pegasystems, where I was head of engineering and CTO at the company called Cordiant that was acquired by Pega, where my real focus was on next best action decisioning, which is now ends up being a really big part of the Pega revenue stream. And we use that at a company called Thunderhead to really create beautiful experiences for business users that wanted to understand their customers better in the context of customer journeys. Thunderhead was acquired in 2022 by Medallia. I then went off and worked for 2.5 years at Qualtrics as a distinguished XM scientist. And during COVID, I obviously was caught like everybody remotely, and I started thinking about books and started writing a book. And after about 6 months, I realized that there's so much knowledge that can be conveyed that I split the book in 2, the strategy book and then the operationalization book. And, after semi-retiring in November 2024, I said, let's go finish things that are not finished. And one of them was to publish the book. So I self-published the book in September. Very excited about it. I realized I'm not going to get rich, especially on a technology book. But I think it's just the feeling of doing what you've wanted to do, and hopefully the knowledge that I convey in the books will help some people get knowledge cheaper than it would cost me, which was 18-hour days, 17 years of my life. And now you're off on retirement. So hopefully somebody can learn from what I found in my books. So, and again, thanks for having me on, Adrian.
You're very, very welcome. Now, first of all, I'll just say congratulations on the books, because I know how much effort it takes to kind of to get these things out, to birth them, let's say. And as you say, there's I got it wrong initially, because I said there's 2 books, then an executive summary, but actually there's 2 books, I think, and then the executive edition. The first one is more, as you say, a strategy book, so the blueprint for CX maturity and enterprise transformation. And then the next one is more about how do you operationalize it. But
yes,
there's some chunky works, and I encourage people to go check them out. But with the third one is this executive edition, because actually, as we know in all organizational contexts, is like getting leaders to read books from cover to cover is hard. But actually producing something which is a bit more not going to give them indigestion, let's say, is probably the right way to go. So we want to talk about the executive edition. So, you've talked about how they came about and things. I mean, I wonder if you can. I want to dig in to some of the things in the books, because particularly in the executive edition, because you talk about things in stages, because it's like it's a journey, right? We talked about customer journeys, but organizations have to go on a journey, and you split the book into different stages of that kind of journey. And the book starts with, I think there's like 9 stages in total. And the first stage is awareness. Now, the thing I wanted to do, I mean, this is just to give people a flavor of the book, because we don't want to talk about all soup to nuts, obviously, because we want people to go and get it. But I wanted to ask you about something that you said in the executive edition, where you say that organizations rarely stumble into awareness by accident. Something shakes them awake. Now, whilst that might seem self-evident to customers and they're serving them on the front line. Why is it such a big leak for many senior leaders?
Well, I think firstly because of the promise of traditional CX is oversold.
Right.
Let's go buy a Qualtrics or Medallia or or whatever solution it is, and we're gonna come up with these awesome scores called NPS and CSAT and stuff like that. That's gonna change our lives. And 3 years into it, the CX budget has just increased and increased, but the company starts not seeing the return on investment from that
Right.
perspective. So, and I think that comes back to why I built the book based on the concept of a customer journey.
Right.
Because I think one of the issues is that CX, customer centricity, is perceived as a project,
Right.
and on the journey side, it's kind of like when you look at individual touch points, it doesn't have valuable meaning to the customer because they don't work in touch points. They work in outcomes of journeys. And so very much like, the book is focused on moving from touch points to journeys, is the fact that organizations need to move from CX and journey management and customer centricity away from being projects to being part of the embedded in the business, operationalized on a day-to-day basis. That's the way they work. That's the way they feel. That's the way they measure themselves. And I think so. What happens is why leaders don't stumble on it, and is suddenly they seen at the budget in here is yes, we invested 50% more on CX. Our churn rate has not decreased.
Mm-hmm.
Our customer lifetime value has not increased. Why are we spending money on this?
Right.
And that's kind of where, okay, let's take a step back and saying, is CX the right thing to do? But CX is in isolation. And then, so the idea is then you start saying, okay, so how do we go about it? We need to be customer centric.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be obsessed about the customer. Are there better ways than doing that? Just taking voice of the customer programs and creating surveys and getting feedback and building NPS-based scores. And that's kind of where the book is then saying, is once you're at that point and you realize you have a problem, is how do you start thinking about the solution? And that's when the book takes the leaders on a journey, across, okay, so if that's the problem, consideration is what do you do about it? Who are the vendors in this place? How do we operationalize, et cetera, across the 9 stages as you mentioned.
Okay. And so the next stage is that you talk about once awareness has been generated, the book moves on to the next stage, which is like consideration a la sort of customer journeys. But it warns that you in that particular stage, you warn of one particular risk, and that is the fastest way to lose credibility in the consideration stage. And I wanted to really ask you to explain that, what it is and why it's important to keep this in mind.
I think from the traditional days, I grew up in the ERP space. Implement ERP, it's going to solve all your problems. And then implement CRM, it's going to all solve all your customer problems, and then CX solve all your problems, and same thing with journey management, solve all your problems. And so it becomes a point where solutions are overpromised without truly understanding the effort that it takes to truly become an organization driven and operationalized in the context of being, customer focused and customer centric. And so I think the thing is, okay, CS didn't work, so let's go buy a journey management solution because that solves the problem. In 12 months, we're going to increase customer lifetime value, reduce churn, reduce costs, et cetera, et cetera. And then 6 months into the effort, the company's not seeing those significant efforts and it starts being shut down. I had the same thing where I was in Vietnam last year for 3 months, where the company wanted to move from NPS to transactional NPS. I said, well, if you want to do that, then you have to really understand your customer journeys. And we started deploying things, and they expected overnight results.
Right.
If you give feedback and you can understand the feedback, how will that change customer behavior? No, it doesn't work that way. And they continue asking me, what is the ROI? I said, I cannot tell you what the ROI is. We have to continue to assess customer behavior and customer feedback to see where there are opportunities for ROI. And I think it's the promise up front with consultants to get the gig or technology company to sell the software, over promise on the capability of CX, CJM, ERP, CRM solutions. And so consideration is really focused on making sure you understand what it takes to become a company that's customer obsessed from a technology and operational or people perspective. So.
Right. And in that stage as well, you also talked about there's this non-negotiable output of consideration. And love a little bit kind of non-negotiables. What's the non-negotiable output then that you outline in the in that particular stage?
I mean, I think it's to come to use small pilots. It is to have small cross-functional pilots that show measurable improvement. Start. What's the English saying? Eating a whale one bite at a time, or
Yeah.
what's the word?
Yeah.
Something like that. And that's what I'm saying is making sure that you take the bite, you see the value, you feel fulfilled, so you can do the next, and you start small. I'm actually working on my fourth book, which is really focused on how do you start. And that is really start one journey at a time. Find the simplest journey that has the highest impact on customer and on business, and start looking at what are the opportunities for operationalization of that journey to embed it in employees' day-to-day life. Making sure the customer understand how what is happening is changing their lives as well. At Thunderade, we had this concept of a customer value exchange, where we want to make sure that the value the customer get translates into significant or sufficient business value, and vice versa. Because if you don't have a solid value of exchange, there's an imbalance, and one's going to lose out, and you don't want that. So
yeah, and then the next stage is commitment, and that's feels like a really important sort of like stage, because it feels like that's where many companies, when they're thinking about change, they've done a bit of experimentation, they've done some proof of concepts, they've going to figured some things out. Then it's about commitment. I mean, so here's my question: is like, if you're a CX leader, I mean, how will you know that you've got organizational commitment? And once you see the signs, how best to sustain it?
I mean, for me, commitment comes into three things: money moves,
Right.
ownership is assigned, and ownership is assigned with authority, not just accountability.
Right.
And then governance changes, and I think that it is the three of those that have to be continually assessed together. You can't say, okay, I've assigned this ownership with authority, but when hard times comes, you reduce your budget. That's not going to change. You can have as much ownership and authority with authority and accountability, but if governance doesn't change, if that doesn't change internally the way the organization operates and works and measures success, then that's not going to work.
No.
And as soon as there becomes an imbalance between those three things, you start having a problem.
Right. And so I don't want to go through the all of the stages kind of one by one, because there's 9 of them and we'd be here for a long time. So, I mean, do you want to give me a quick flavor of like what the other kind of stages are? Then, because we've had awareness, we've had consideration, we've had commitment. What are the other sort of like 6? And are there anything that you think you'd highlight out of those 6 that are key things that people need to think about?
Well, obviously, I think we all come from the technology industry, and the next one is after you've made a commitment and the money is assigned, is how you build the capabilities. And I love Graham Hill that always talks about, we just focus too much on technology. It's people as well. So for me, when you've made the commitment and the money is there, you've agreed to have authoritative journey owners. It is to do what we call the next stage is capability, which is focused on equipping people, platforms, and the way of working. I think that's really, really the key thing.
Yeah.
And once that's in place, you move on to the use stage, where the focus is on making journey management the default operating rhythm.
Right.
And it's not just a one-off thing, it's a continuous, it's like that what did you call those things that was on top of a piano?
Oh, like a metronome.
A metronome. It's like a metronome. Is continually, it's a rhythm of an organization. It's not just, at peak season we're going to do this. It's a continuous throughout the world. And then for me, I think the crux is where over promising, was an issue in consideration, is the key one for me of the remaining 6 is value realization. It's
Right.
proving ROI in language, finance trusts. It's not just oh, my NPS is up. And I think when you look at some of the authors on LinkedIn, some of the posts on LinkedIn, how there's a tremendous amount of effort to pressurize technology companies in the CX and CDM space to find better ways to prove the value of the efforts that they have from a technology investment perspective, from a people investment perspective, and I think if that's there, that becomes easy to support the next three, which is organizational alignment, transformation, and advocacy. So truly the concept of a journey. But again, in the context of the journey, you don't just go through the journey once. As you continue through the stages, you continue to have to go back and saying, how is what I've done make changes and become aware of other initiatives and opportunities, and then continue to go through the cycle. So that's why I say it's an operational aspect. It's not just a one time, I'm going to do this and deploy it. It's a continuously adaptive self-learning mechanism that the organization will understand what is happening, how we need to respond and change to be able to accommodate the change in customer behavior, the change in competitor behavior. And that's why I'm excited about the book, because it really moves away from, like I said, touch points versus journeys. It moves away from projects to continuous rhythmic operational aspects.
Yeah. And so, I mean, but it also feels like a big job of work as well. And I wanted to get, without scaring people, what sort of like time frame are we talking about? Because, I mean, we're talking about cultural change, structural change, all of those sort of things. I mean, what sort of time frame we're talking about to go through all of the stages to develop this new rhythm, so we can get an idea of the, pardon the pun, the idea of the commitment that's required of how long that journey is going to be.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say, it's not a big bang transformation. I think that's the key thing. A lot of people go in and they think within 6 months or 12 months, we're going to have transformed the organization from where we are to be a customer-centric, customer-centric organization that's operationalized. No, that's not true. I think, as I said earlier, you take something small, and that's why I like to inherit value from the agile approach in the engineering space. You start small, but making sure that everything you deliver at a minimum delivers value to the customer and to the organization itself. And then you grow through cycles, add more capabilities, add more features and stuff like that. So I've seen, the 11 years I was at Thunderhead, I think the first impact value you see is 6 to 12 months.
Right.
But when you look at the concept of customer journeys, a lot of that is focused still on the insights. I think when you get to really being mature, you get into a more maturity of orchestration, especially when you get into real-time orchestration. And that takes 2 to 4 years. I mean, just to be honest, the companies have to understand we have to find ways to not necessarily overload the budget in the beginning, but find ways to negotiate with vendors to saying, we're going to start small, we're going to take, now the thing is you can't really take a department, but you have to find a journey that runs across departments. Because if you again take a specific department and saying I'm going to have a journey that's within customer support, you're having a problem because you're creating silos. You're creating a new platform on top of silos. So make sure that the journey you select, that you firstly can understand what the issues are, how will I value and estimate and calculate metrics, track metrics that I can see tangible value to the customer and the business. And make sure that's small enough. You could say, I want to see value in 3 months. We know it's going to happen in 6 months. That's just the way technology works. Everything takes 2 to 3 times that you say. So make sure that you find something conciseful, meaningful, and find opportunities where you bring a small core of people. I talk about journey pods or journey squads, and start taking one squad and coaching them, educate them, have a journey owner that can become the trainer of trainers within the organization, and the squad itself become the trainer of trainers, and then expand over time. So, but I would say don't expect full ROI value anywhere from 2 to 4 years.
And I think you just answered my next question, because because my final question was on this was like, how should a leader and the team get started with all this? And it seems to be that you find a journey, but pick one that is not isolated, but one that kind of cuts across different kind of like silos, because an intrinsically important part of this is to get cross-functional collaboration and impact as well. And that, because then that's going to allow you to bring the right sort of people together as the right pods or right squads or whatever in order to, I guess, generate momentum. I mean,
I think the
go
biggest
ahead.
challenge is the change of people traditionally having metrics within departments. I mean, you know, customer service is how much time do you customers spend on the call? You know, if it's low, the team has done well. If it's high, the team has done bad. But there's no relationship ever to what's the impact of the customer buying behavior post that call. You know, you might have had a quick call, but the customer churned a week later. You know, because he was just upset with I can't get answers. So I'm just going to put the phone down. And so the biggest part of this challenge is that's why cross-functional team is so important is the philosophical mindset to saying we are going to have organizational wide metrics that measures not me as a person, as a department, but measure the experience of the customer over time and the impact that it has on the business as a whole, not just the cost that it introduced into the customer service center, because it might be that we find that if people spend longer on calls, that what I talk about positive friction sometimes translates into an increase in customer lifetime value and increase in loyalty. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, hopefully that gives kind of some people an idea of this as like, you know, it says in inverted commas, you know, on an audio recording, a flavor of the journey that you're going to try and take people on with this kind of, well, one with the two books, the strategy and the operational kind of ones, the larger terms, but also the executive edition. It's like, this is a journey that you go in and trying to help you think about what you need to do and how you educate yourself, how you build capability and stuff. But is there anything that also you'd like to highlight that we've kind of like missed out before I kind of, you know, I wrap up and let you get back to the golf course or make your plans to go to the golf course?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that I have to emphasize that customer journeys are not diagrams, you know, they're management constructs. And I think that's a big thing. And I think the good thing for us, seeing through the Institute for Journey Management, which is really an institute of customer journey management, not an institute of customer journey mapping or even service design, we are seeing a tremendous effort by the founding members. They do the semanticas, the question pros, the, you know, form bricks, the journey tracks. They are really focusing on extending the capabilities beyond journey mapping into truly, you know, omnipresent customer journeys and continues improving customer journeys that goes beyond. I think even we see Forrester with their latest customer journey management of Forrester Wave that's come out is that they are starting to, I think, pressure through customer feedback is that these companies should do more than just mapping journeys because they have value, but their value is reduced. And I think with the advent of AI, you know, I have this thing where I say in the past it took 80% effort to map a journey and then they spent 20% operationalizing it. I think with AI, the effort and the ease of mapping journeys through artificial intelligence, you're switching around. You have 20%, you can so much quicker create customer journeys based on, you know, using prompts in ChatGPT and Claude. So now the effort is going to say, okay, so what do we do with the journeys that just mapped? How do we operationalize? And that's why there's a whole switch from the 80-20 to the 20-80 perspective. So
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So Ray, for just in a way of kind of wrapping up, I've got some quick fire questions for you. And the first one is about your best advice. And I've been asking people to complete a sentence I'm going to give you as a way of sort of prompting you, as it were, for your best advice. And so what would be your best advice to someone listening in that wants to improve their customer experience? And so the question is, if you want to improve your customer experience, Ray says, do this.
Manage journeys like assets, not artifacts. Okay, stop fixing touch points and start managing your journeys end to end.
Awesome. Fantastic. Now, the next one is a punk one, obviously, because the Punk CX podcast. So what company or brand do you think takes a more punk approach to customer experience and why?
You're saying which brand?
Yeah.
I would say the most impressive in my experience was when I was at Thunderhead. I'm not allowed to use their name, but it's a utility company in Germany that had 20 million subscribers. And it just, what was amazing with them is we never met with one person. It felt to me that we met with a company.
Right.
When they were made the decision to use journeys, we meant for the company as a whole, and what was nice about that, we felt that they were not really focused on how does the solution, protect their jobs or their org charts or their systems or their budgets. It was really focused on they were tracking customer efforts, trying to understand trust. How do we build trust, and how do we optimize the time that customers spend with that as the brand, so those brands can have value. So
awesome, that's great. And one final question. Is I've been asking people to tell me a good news story, because feels like the world's in a weird place and there's a lot of doom scrolling going on right now. And so, if you will, tell me the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week, or even just something that you've gone, that's just made me smile.
I always say, when I look at the Amazon and the Apple, I had this funny thing where I was at the airport in Atlanta many, many years ago, and somebody was saying to me, why is Apple stock so high? And I took an example. I said, look, what's on my hand? He says, an iPhone. And then I took my laptop out of my bag, and there was an Apple laptop. And then I took my iPad out, and there's my iPad. And I said, that's why. Because these things work seamlessly together across devices, that reduces the effort for me. And so when I look at, I see the way that Amazon work with Prime, and I start seeing other companies starting to learn from those capabilities. I'm excited about where we'll be in 5 years. I think we have to be concerned a little bit about how AI will impact this, and people will always feel that there's a human touch to what they do. But it feels to me that I'm starting to see more and more of companies become Amazon-like. I see more and more companies become Apple-like, and that's when it's really, really great for me. But also I've seen companies changing the way they incentivize employees. It's based on the company working together. So not how good customer service was or product was. It's really how well did we do as an organization, not just focused on revenue and cost savings, but really on the feedback from the customers and how they experience us. And I think the word of mouth, is, and I think that for me is something really, really, really exciting to see, and how things are changing. That's why Mark and I, as co-founders of the Institute, are so excited, because we believe the space is still immature, but it's kind of coming at the right point, where companies are trying to say, we seem to be doing the laborious things easier with AI. So how can we maximize the value of the people we have to do the heavy lifting, which are the things we stayed away from in the past?
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And just want to say, first of all, congratulations on the 2 books, and also the executive edition, which is, I guess, the third one.
You.
Good luck writing the 4th one. Maybe we should keep me posted on that, because we maybe kind of the art of the start is always kind of like an important kind of bit. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming back on the podcast and also sharing your expertise with me today. That's been great.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the time. And, I look forward to people engaging if they see the podcast and they buy the book. I'm on LinkedIn, and I've already on my 2nd edition of the first book, just based on feedback, because I did, self-publishing. There were some spelling mistakes and some formatting mistakes, and, people were honest to come back. But I also had some very interesting conversations with people saying, on page 27, you talked about this. Let's talk about this on LinkedIn. And I'm really open to that. I think the biggest challenge for me, Adrian, as my personality, is how do I kiss? How do I keep it simple and stupid? Because you can see with the first book was the thick, the second one is even thicker, and the 4th one feels it's going to even be thicker, because it's going to contain 72 templates, that are really practical. But how do I find ways to really understand that not everybody has the knowledge that maybe you and I and the Marks have, and make sure that I keep the message simple so people can actually learn, instead of being pushed away by the complexity what I'm trying to convey.
Well, I mean, in doing it, being open about it, and being willing to sort of to discuss it and to kind of work on it, I feel like publicly in many ways is a sure route to getting to the point where it becomes helpful, useful, valuable. Helpful, useful, and valuable for people. So good luck on that. And
thank you.
Thank you once again for joining me today. That's been great.
Thank you, Adrian. Have a nice day. I'm going to play golf now. So.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.